Told you we were going to put on a great show, right? Right? In the words of Maximus Decimus Meridius, are you not entertained? That was pretty entertaining. It was fun.
Are you not entertained?
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Most of y'all are doing okay because most of your teams didn't play yesterday, but we did have a handful of games. Welcome to the first Your Season is Over video for 2025, Week 0 edition. This is kind of like a warm-up routine, you know? These videos get pretty long during the season because you have a lot of spectacular losses every Saturday, but only a handful of games yesterday, so just a few games to talk about today. So this one will be quicker than usual. And also, a lot of the segments that I do in the Your Season is Over video doesn't really make sense to do today. We do like a top 4 or 5 Heisman list, and these are the best teams and these were the worst teams, and update the We're Back list and different things like that. That just not really a whole lot of point doing a lot of that kind of stuff. We're going to do some of it. So if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Your Season is Over video. I do this video every Sunday. It's a recap video. Your Season is Over it's an analogy. It's a euphemism too. You'll have to Google that or ask Jeeves. Anyway, obviously, nobody that lost yesterday's season is over. I know that. They all have 11 more games. It doesn't technically mean that the team's season is over, okay? It's kind of a point and laugh thing that we do. Ha, 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 you lost, your season is over, you're terrible, you suck, that kind of thing. So I'm going to end up having to explain that 100 times this season, but there you go. Again, if you're new to this video is normally about an hour and a half long. I recap all of the games from the day before, but instead of highlighting winners and great performances, we highlight losers and we laugh at funny shit that people did or said, or teams that lost or whatever. It's like the opposite of a highlight video, I guess. And they get pretty long because there's a lot of games every Saturday, but that wasn't the case yesterday with only a handful of games. So this one will be sort of a scaled down version. With that being said, we do have some shit to talk about from yesterday, though. I guess we're just going to kind of go in order that the games were played. We'll start with the first game, even though that was kind of the biggest game yesterday. And, of course, I have copious notes. Yeah, of course I do. What's the matter with you? Yeah. In fact, I got 2 pages. I got to turn the page to get to the Kansas State debacle. This was not a good football game to watch, particularly in the first half. And I feel especially bad about that because we exported this game to Ireland, and I know they've had other games there, so they kind of know what to expect, and they've seen some good football there. This was not that. And we're going to talk more about this in a second. And this is true really for all of the teams that played yesterday, kind of. And the teams that are getting ready to play for the first time this coming week. When you watch it, when you have a certain expectation level for a team and you watch them play one game and they either exceed that expectation or fall way short of that expectation, how do you truly know whether the team is way better than you thought they were, the team is way worse than you thought they were? Because you don't really know yet what the other team is. So it's kind of like you need to see a couple of games type of thing. But you take this game yesterday, I don't know coming out of this game if Kansas State and Iowa State are 2 of the best teams in the Big 12 or 2 of the worst teams in the Big 12 or somewhere in between. I've got no idea. Obviously, the weather factored into that yesterday. The first half in particular was just an absolute disaster in terms of weather. It was pouring down rain. The field did not look like it was in very good condition to handle that amount of rain. You had players slipping all over the place. Of course, Dylan Edwards, who I hate all injuries. We all hate injuries. This one particularly upset me because, again, for those of you that have been around this channel for a while, you know that there becomes a handful of players every single year across the country on various teams that I just really like watching for one reason or another. Dylan Edwards is one of those players. He's one of these like undersized, what you used to describe as like a scat back. But I absolutely love watching Dylan Edwards play. He's lightning in a bottle, that guy. And he got hurt in the first quarter. He turned his ankle, most likely as a direct result of the weather and the field conditions. It was just, you saw people slipping around all over the place in that thing. He turned an ankle. I don't know the severity. He left in the first quarter, went to the locker room. He did come back out to the sideline, but he didn't have his helmet. He never went back in the game. He just had a towel over his head. So we can hope that he just maybe rolled it and he'll be better in a few days. We can hope maybe he just twisted it and he'll be better maybe by next week. But if it's a sprain, boy, those things can keep you out for a while, especially a running back like him. Again, he's not like a between the tackles straight line bruiser. He's a zigzag juke type of get you out in space and make a bunch of moves type of running backs. And without an ankle, becomes extremely hard to do. And then if it is a sprain, is it a high ankle sprain, which can be a whole other issue? I hope he's back sooner rather than later, just because I really like watching him play. Kansas State obviously needs him back very soon. If you watched the game yesterday, without him, you know what I'm talking about. They need him back. He's probably their best player. So that sucked to see early in the game. But the field conditions were a disaster, and it wasn't great football in the first half. I mean, it was tied 7-7 at halftime, but the first half was filled with poor passes due to wet balls, dropped passes, I'm assuming due to wet balls, players slipping and sliding all over the field, muffed punts because of the weather, turnovers, just bad football. And again, because of the weather, because it was week 0, and because I've never seen either one of those teams play another game yet this year, I come away from that game going, okay, I had Kansas State ranked in my top 15. I had Iowa State ranked just outside my top 15. Am I right or wrong about that? Is Kansas State not a top 25 team at all because they lost by 3 neutral site to Iowa State? Is Iowa State really good? And so maybe I did have Kansas State ranked right, but I need to have Iowa State higher. Is Iowa State terrible and Kansas State's just even worse than that? Hard to tell from just the one game. I will say this. I'm disappointed in Avery Johnson. I know that it was wet and that made it hard to throw the ball. And it's not like he had a terrible game by the numbers. He was 21 of 30 for 273 yards with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. He also ran for 21 yards and a touchdown. So I'm not one of these stat watchers. So it's not that. I watched the entire game. So, you look at, if you didn't watch the game and you look at that stat line, you go, that's a pretty good stat line, especially considering the weather. I'll agree with that. But when you just watch him play the position of quarterback, he looks uncomfortable sometimes. I expected more. This is a guy that's been there for 3 years. He played at the end of the year 2 years ago. He was the full-time starter last year. And he just, again, I'm going to give him another week or two before I completely say, God, looks like I was dead wrong about Avery Johnson. Because I've been really high on Avery Johnson and Kansas State. Kansas State was my pick to win the Big 12. I know it was raining. I know it was week 0. The team I saw yesterday was not the team I expected to see out of Kansas State. And obviously you can attribute some of that to Dylan Edwards. You can attribute some of that, not being in the game. You can attribute some of that to the weather. But I just thought I would see more and see better from Kansas State, and I didn't. Now, it ended up being a great game. Iowa State wins 24-21. They get down to the end there, take the knee, run out the clock, win the game by 3, 24-21. Again, Avery Johnson, 21 of 30, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 21 rushing yards, and a touchdown. So stat line was good there. On the other side, Iowa State, who has their own sort of returning high-level quarterback in Rocco Becht. Not so good. 14 of 28 for 183 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Again, because of the weather, I expect both of these quarterbacks' numbers to improve in terms of completion percentages and things like that. Avery Johnson completed about 65% of his passes. Rocco Becht right at about 50%. He also had a touchdown on the ground, by the way. Iowa State, 130 rushing yards. Kansas State, 110 rushing yards. To me, these are the 2 most surprising stats of the game because, you think going in, okay, it's going to be raining. The weather's going to be bad. The turf is going to be bad. Your ball's going to be wet. Not going to be able to throw the ball. Receivers aren't going to be able to catch the ball. Probably going to be a lot of running. And there was a lot of running, but not a lot of successful running. I thought both of these run defenses actually played pretty good. I mean, giving up 130 and 110 yards respectively on the ground, that's not bad. So as far as like the best units on the field yesterday, the run defense for both teams I thought was really good. Each team did have 2 fumbles. Again, does that mean fumbling the ball is going to be an issue for these 2 teams going forward into this season? It's hard to say that the conditions were so bad. You have to think that contributed to it. contributed to it at least a little bit. Talked about the Dylan Edwards injury. What else do I have on here? 7-7 at halftime. Terrible first half. The weather did clear up some in the second half, and that's where a lot of these passing numbers came from for both teams. By the way, the flow of the game was kind of odd too. It's like Kansas State literally couldn't do anything offensively until Iowa State would score. Iowa State couldn't do anything either. But it was almost like a follow the leader thing. It was like if Iowa State punted, Kansas State would punt. If Iowa State turned the ball over, Kansas State would turn the ball over. And then, by some miracle, when Iowa State scored, Kansas State would get the ball and go right down and score. It was almost like a copycat thing, and it felt like whoever's got the ball last is going to win. And it did turn out to be that way. Maybe not the way you would expect with like a walk-off field goal or touchdown, but Iowa State kind of running the clock out there at the end, going for it on the fourth down there. A hell of a call by Iowa State. Kansas State, on the other hand, terrible decision to go for it on that fourth down, I thought. Late in the game, I think it was 8 or 9 minutes left in the game. They're only down 3, and they go for it on their own, like 28-yard line. Boneheaded, Chris Kleiman. What are you doing? I'm a Chris Kleiman fan. I think he's a good head coach. Matt Campbell's a good head. These are two good head coaches. That's another thing. When you watch the game yesterday, it's hard to go, wow, these two teams are unprepared. It came off a little that way, but I don't think these teams were unprepared. These are two veteran coaching staffs, pretty good coaching staffs too. I think it was the weather, the travel, the week 0, some conservative play calling due to all of those things. I still think both Iowa State and Kansas State are legitimate contenders to win the Big 12. Now, obviously, Kansas State is fighting an uphill battle now. It's hard enough to lose a conference game, but when you lose your first conference game, it almost becomes close to must win at this point for Kansas State the rest of the way, at least in terms of conference play. Now, I do think you're going to have a 2 and maybe even a 3-loss team out of the Big 12 make it to the conference title game, and maybe that ends up being Kansas State, but you're really putting yourself in a corner when you go out and lose the first conference game of the season. And that's what happened to Kansas State yesterday. So they're going to be fighting uphill the rest of the way. I still think they're a good team. The problem is they're not clearly better than Iowa State, obviously. I don't think they're clearly better than Arizona State. I don't know if they're clearly better than Baylor or Texas Tech or BYU or I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Kansas, we're going to talk about Kansas in a minute. That was the best team I saw yesterday. I mean, did y'all watch any? I don't know how many games y'all. Kansas looks good, so but we'll get to that in a second. So the point I'm making is, it's hard to throw in the towel on your team that you picked after one game. Kansas State was my pick to win the Big 12. It's hard to throw in the towel after one loss in week 0, especially given sort of the odd circumstances surrounding the game. The weather and the Dylan Edwards injury and all that. But boy, I'll tell you this. I didn't look it up. Maybe I should have. Whatever Kansas State's odds were to win the Big 12 plummeted drastically by losing their first conference game. They are swimming upstream the rest of the way. Shout out to Iowa State, Matt Campbell, quarterback Rocco Becht. Good win. That's a good win. I don't know whether both these teams are good or both these teams are bad. I don't know. Kansas State, what do they have coming up? Probably going to be without Dylan Edwards. What do they got coming up? Well, they play North Dakota this week. You would assume they can win that one. That's a home game. And then they play Army. Now, Kansas State played good run defense, and you're going to need that against Army because that's all they do is run the ball. Army, I'm going to be tougher than North Dakota. Neither one of those are conference games, though. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on YouTube. But my fake medical advice to Kansas State and Dylan Edwards would be to sit those 2 games out. Let that ankle heal completely. The only way Kansas State's getting to the playoffs is to win the Big 12 title. So it really doesn't matter whether they lose to North Dakota and Army. They've got to win the rest of their Big 12 games. And in order to do that, they're going to need a healthy Dylan Edwards. I would sit him the next 2 games. And if that means they lose, they lose. You got to win the Big 12 games, not these non-con games. But anyway, that's what's coming up for them. Iowa State has South Dakota, and then they play Iowa, the in-state rivalry. I think they play week 3 every year. And, of course, the score of that game will be 6-3 or 7-2 or something weird like 8-5. That game looks like a baseball score every time they play. Iowa and Iowa State, but that'll be a good one in a couple of weeks. But that's what's coming up with them. But man, at least for today, Kansas State, your season is over, bud. Damn, the first victim was Kansas. The first victim of the your season is over list in 2025 was one of Uncle Lou's picks to make the playoffs. Dang. Am I down bad? We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about my picks on how I did on my picks on these games here in a little bit. I might be in a bad way. We'll find out. Y'all waiting to troll me, ain't you? Yeah, you are. All right, let's talk about Fresno State and Kansas. I touched on this a minute ago. Kansas is the best team I saw play yesterday by a mile. I mean, by a mile. So if you are one of these people that don't believe in preseason rankings, and you think no ranking should come out until some games are played, and you had to rank the teams that played yesterday, because those would be the only teams you were allowed to rank by your own rule, right? Oh, don't rank the teams until the season starts. Kansas would be number one on everybody's ranking. They look like a legitimate Big 12 title contender to me. I know they played Fresno State, but listen, just like I told you in the preview for that game, Fresno State plays Power 4 opponents every single year. They're not afraid. Now, they're not some juggernaut that beats Power 4 opponents all the time, but they're not intimidated to go into a Power 4 stadium. They looked outmatched big time yesterday. Jalen Daniels, again, if you're talking on only what we've seen in actual games so far this year and not preseason projections, Jalen Daniels, best player in the country today that we've seen play. This guy lit it up yesterday, completed 90% of his passes. That's hard to do against air. Did I write these numbers? Yeah, Jalen Daniels, 18 of 20, 176 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He had another 47 rushing yards. Kansas had 207 yards rushing. That wide receiver they have, too, Pickett, 77 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. So they've got an electric quarterback in Jalen Daniels. They've got a good ground game aided by quarterback Jalen Daniels. They've got a potential NFL wide receiver in Pickett. They've got a good offense. And their offense is fun to watch, too. I don't know who their offensive coordinator is, but I like the Kansas offense. They were fun to watch, and they dominated this thing from start to finish. I thought Fresno State would lose, but I didn't think they'd lose this bad. The final score was 31-7, and it could have been worse. It was 31-7 at the end of the third quarter or beginning of the fourth quarter, and Kansas kind of went into coast mode there, just trying to get out of there. I don't blame them. Against a group of 5 team, the last thing you want is something to happen to Jalen Daniels there in the fourth quarter of a blowout. He does have a history of injury, so I don't blame him for doing that. But the point I'm making is Kansas was favored by 13 or 14, depending on where you looked. I thought Fresno State would keep it within those 2 touchdowns. This game could have been 45-7. I mean, Kansas absolutely dominated them. Week 0, you haven't seen either of those 2 teams play anybody else. So maybe it turns out that Fresno State's just terrible. That's what I was talking about at the beginning of the video. Week 0, it's really hard to force yourself to recalculate a team after week 0 because you've only seen them one time and you don't know. In other words, maybe Kansas is way better than I thought. Maybe Fresno State is way worse than I thought. Or maybe it's both. You need to see them play another time to figure it out. But boy, Kansas looked good. They looked like the real deal to me. And I thought I had a Fresno State helmet, but I don't. All morning when I was sitting around with a copious notes figuring out what helmets I was going to put on the wall, I was like, well, Kansas State for sure. I could put Fresno State up there. You'll see the rest when we go. And then I got ready to do it, and I was like, shit, I don't have a Fresno State helmet. I mean, it's easy to figure out. I keep them in alphabetical order. So you got Florida A&M, FAU, FIU, Furman. There is no Fresno State anywhere. Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Hawaii. We'll talk about Hawaii here in a second. But Kansas State looked really good. Really good. What else did I write down that I wanted to talk about here? Fresno State only had 37 yards rushing. And on top of that, Kansas State's defense picked off 2 passes. So they were great against the run defensively. They were great against the pass defensively. Jalen Daniels completed 90% of his passes and looked like a wizard running around in the backfield. They had a receiver go for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. They rushed for 207 yards. I get it, it's Fresno State, but man, they looked like a complete team yesterday. They looked like a complete team. Now, Kansas, like a lot of teams in that sort of mid-tier of college football, they don't recruit at the level of a lot of these big boy teams that you see in the top 10 and 15 every year. So while injuries can hinder any team, injuries to a team like Kansas are magnified because chances are if a Kansas starter gets injured, the backup is going to be nowhere near that level. The chances are, especially when you start talking about their best players like quarterback Jalen Daniels. He's got to stay healthy. They've got to be more consistent. They've almost played 2 different seasons in each season over the last 2 or 3 years. It's been really weird. They either start off really hot, 4-0, 5-1, 6-2, and then lose all the games at the end of the year. Or it's the opposite. They start out 1-4, 2-6, and then win 5 games at the end of the year. They need to figure out a way to put that together. And one of the ways that will make it a lot easier for them to figure that out is to stay healthy, particularly quarterback Jalen Daniels. But boy, he's fun to watch. And he put on a show yesterday. That was the best team I saw play yesterday, Kansas. And he was the best player I saw play yesterday, was Jalen Daniels. So shout out to them. But Fresno State, your season is over. Yeah. What else do we got? Oh boy. Did y'all stay up and watch the Stanford Hawaii game? Oh, let's talk about this for a second. So go back in time to last year's playoffs. Everybody complained, nothing but blowouts. Oh my God, I hate blowouts. Blah, blah, blah. I don't really understand. I've been over this a million times. College football is a game of blowouts. Like, there's just never going to end. There's always been blowouts in college football, whether you're talking about regular season, whatever type of postseason we've ever had, whether it was random bowl matchups, whether it was BCS matchups, whether it was New Year's Six, whether it was 4-team playoff, or now in the 12-team playoff, you always have blowouts in college football. More often than not, there's a team or 2 or 3 that are a lot better than everyone else. And it's just the way it works out. So if you're one of those people who don't like the blowouts, and look, I get it, they're boring to watch, especially in the second half. I understand that. Then you should have loved yesterday. We talked about Kansas State, Iowa State not being great football, but boy, it was a 1-possession game, the entire game, right down to the very end. Stanford and Hawaii, which we're getting ready to talk about now. Game-winning field goal by Hawaii to win this thing 23-20. A back-and-forth game, a 1-possession game for the entire game. If you want close games, 1-possession games, if that's your definition of exciting and good football, then you should have loved these games yesterday. The Idaho State UNLV games we'll talk about in a minute. Back and forth game. Looked like Idaho State might blow them out in the first quarter. Then UNLV comes back in the second quarter. And then the entire second half was back and forth. We'll get into it. But the point is, all of these games yesterday, for the most part, came down to the end. So in terms of the excitement level in the fourth quarter, these games were off the charts. And the Stanford and Hawaii game might have been the best of the bunch. Hawaii ends up winning 23-20 on a game-winning field goal. Stanford quarterback, they got to figure something out here. We could talk about Avery Johnson and Rocco Beck playing in the pouring down rain in Ireland and how we weren't impressed with that. But this was sunshine and 75 degrees, and this guy looked like he'd never seen a football before. I mean, it was embarrassingly bad. How bad he played. What else? Did I write any of this down? 15 of 30, 50% completion percentage against Hawaii. Again, I'm not here to throw shade at Hawaii, but Stanford is a Power 4 team, at least they pretend to be. And you complete 50% of your passes against Hawaii for 109 yards, 15 of 30 for 109 yards, no touchdowns and an interception. Terrible quarterback play there. Now, the running back had a pretty good game. Micah Ford, 26 carries for 113 yards and a touchdown. But, I mean, Stanford just can't be a one-man show in the Power 4. I mean, I know you're in the ACC, but my God, you were one of the worst teams in the ACC last year. And from what I saw yesterday, you're going to be one of the worst again. They were bad. They were really bad. Any legitimate Power 4 opponent is going to figure out how to take one player out of the game, your running back. I mean, you stack the box against Stanford, they'll have no answer at all with this Golberson or whatever the fuck his name is at quarterback. This guy was a yard turd. It was bad. He was really bad. Hawaii, 96 rushing yards, 210 passing yards. So defensively, they played okay against Hawaii. I mean, what does that really mean going forward? it's hard to know, I guess. Maybe Hawaii ends up to be some kind of offensive juggernaut this season. Although I strongly doubt it. It looks to me like Stanford might be complete dog shit again in 2025. And we got to talk about Andrew Luck. Is something wrong with him? He looks off. And I'm just going to leave it at that and let you figure it out on your own from there. The other thing with Andrew Luck is, he's got the job title of general manager. Okay, a lot of college football teams these days are hiring general managers to help manage the roster, basically. How many Scully players do we have? How many Scullys do we have left to give? What's our budget for NIL? What's our budget for direct payments from the university? Who's getting what amount of money? Which of our players are entering the portal? What players are in the portal that we might want to bring in? It's a general manager. It's a roster management position. It sure does seem like he wants to be a lot more than that, doesn't it? Chances are your team has a general manager, whoever your team is. And chances are you have no idea who it is. And that's how I like it. I'm going to tell you now, I've got no idea if Georgia even has a general manager. And that's how I like it. I don't want my general manager being a part of the everyday story. Now, some of this with Stanford is because it's Andrew Luck. And he was a quarterback there and had some success. It was the number 1 overall pick in the NFL and kind of flamed out due to injuries. And he's just like a popular known name. So that's got something to do with it. But there's more than that going on here. He is injecting himself into the spotlight and into Stanford, I think, more than a general manager should. I'm not sure if he's got some sort of hopes or aspirations of being something else, a coach. He seems like he's always around. In other words, if I was the head coach at Stanford, I don't want Andrew Luck as an extra shadow. You're a general manager. Go sit in an office somewhere and figure out the roster. Figure out NIL. Figure out which of our players are entering the portal in December. Leave me alone. Get off the field. It just seems he reminds me of an Ed Reed type at Miami. And that didn't work. It was a joke. Now, in the case of Andrew Luck, at least he's got an actual job, general manager, whereas Ed Reed was pretty much just paid to stand on the sideline and look homeless. Now, he did a great job of that. A lot of times you wouldn't even have known it was Ed Reed. You literally would have thought it was just a homeless person that somehow wandered onto the sideline. So in terms of looking like a homeless person standing aimlessly on the sideline, Ed Reed was amazing at doing that. But what else did he do? What was even his fake job? It was a mob job that they gave Ed Reed. I don't even know what he was doing there. Anyway, there's some of that going on with Andrew Luck too. Like he's always around, and you're like, what is he doing? What's his purpose for being here? It's weird. And I know Stanford got put in an odd spot because they fired their coach a couple of months before the season started, some sort of office harassment scandal. I'm not going to get into all that. So they kind of backs against the wall thing and just kind of had to name a coach. And isn't he an interim coach? So it just makes it even worse. So basically, every game this guy coaches, he's coaching for his job, while Andrew Luck is standing behind him like impending danger, an extra shadow, technically the general manager, but just everywhere all the time, seemingly for no reason. I don't know. It just seems like a bad situation at Stanford. It did not look good yesterday against Hawaii at all. Stanford's down bad, and the ACC might be in a bad way. They start the season 0-1. The ACC does in non-con games, taking a loss to a G5 team, a pretty bad G5. I mean, let's just call it what it. Hawaii's not making the playoffs or getting ranked. Like, they're not very good. Stanford loses to them, and then I don't want to look too far ahead here on this video, which is a recap from yesterday. But in talking about the ACC real quick, so they're 0-1 because Stanford loses. You look next week, Miami and Notre Dame. What if Miami loses that game? What if Clemson loses to LSU? Now, I don't think either of those things are happening, by the way. I picked Miami to win. I picked Clemson to win. But Florida State's going to lose to Bama. What if Syracuse loses to Tennessee? What if Georgia Tech? In other words, it's got an opportunity to be a great week 1, week 2 situation for the ACC. A lot of marquee matchups in big games. And they could sort of, put their stamp on the 2025 season early here and sort of shake off some of the negative criticism that surrounded the ACC lately about sort of being a subpar conference. They'd have a chance to do that if Miami can beat Notre Dame, if Clemson can beat LSU, if Syracuse can beat Tennessee, if Georgia Tech can beat Colorado, if Florida State can beat Alabama. There's also a chance they lose the overwhelming majority of those games. And that's, it would be a bad look. We'll see. But Stanford, man, it's hard to find hope for them right now. Now, luckily, there aren't any Stanford fans, so I don't even know who I'm talking to in this video. I might be talking to myself. Is anybody even still watching? I don't know. But Stanford, you look bad. You got beat by the fucking Rainbow Warriors. Jesus Christ. The tree is down bad. Stanford, your season is over. Honestly, your season was over before it started. I think you already know that. The Florida helmet is a joke, obviously. Let's take that. We'll take that away. It is funny to me, though. Florida fans took a loss yesterday, but I'm not going to put the Florida helmet on the your season is over list just because their fans took a loss. Why do Florida fans love Idaho State so much? I can't figure this out. I was minding my own business yesterday watching the UNLV Idaho State game, which UNLV won, by the way. And after the game was over, I go on Twitter, and I must have been tagged 500 times by Florida fans in the first quarter or random points in the third quarter of that game when Idaho State was winning. What? I don't understand the connection between Florida fans and Idaho State. Why were y'all so invested in that Idaho State game? It's weird. You're a Florida fan. They didn't play yesterday. As far as I know, Florida's never played Idaho State. I'm trying to figure out why it is that Florida fans were so invested in Idaho State. It was weird. It was really weird. But anyway, UNLV gets the win, defeating the potato, the Idaho State potatoes. That's the good news. The good news is that UNLV started 1-0. And obviously, we know why Florida fans were tagging me a million times when Idaho State was beating UNLV. It's because Dan Mullen is the coach of UNLV. And Florida fired him too early and hired a guy that doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, Billy Napier. So now Florida fans want Dan Mullen to lose games to somehow, in their mind, justify firing him for Billy Napier, a guy that is yet to have a season as good as any of Dan Mullen's seasons. It's odd, and it ended up not working out yesterday for the Florida fan. They took another loss because Dan Mullen won. So, but anyway, we know the deal with that. But Idaho State, if you want to be serious for a second, UNLV looked absolutely terrible, and I don't know if it can be fixed this season, now, whether it's Dan Mullen's fault or whatever it is. They looked like they had no game plan. That was the strangest thing about that game, is that they looked like they had no real game plan. It looked like, and look, I don't know anything about Idaho State, okay? But I wasn't playing them yesterday. It looked like UNL's defense had no idea that Idaho State was going to run a spread and go hurry up. Maybe they've never done that before. Again, I don't know. Maybe they used to run the triple option. That's what it looked like. It looked like UNLV defensively spent all offseason preparing for Idaho State to run the triple option or whatever, something. And instead, Idaho State comes out in shotgun, 4 and 5 wide, hurry up offense the whole game. And UNLV had no clue how to defend it. That's what it looked like. That's the best case scenario for UNLV. Worst case scenario, they knew Idaho State was going to do that, and they still couldn't fucking stop it. And even if they didn't know, They knew by halfway through the first quarter. They knew by the second quarter. They knew by the second half. And they did play a little bit better defensively second half. But wow, they got dominated on both lines of scrimmage. They were missing tackles. Idaho State was running through UNLV arm tackles all day long. You know what it looked like? It looked like when Georgia played Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. And every time Nick Chubb or Sony Michel touched the ball, they ran through 7 or 8 Oklahoma arm tackles en route to a 40 or 50-yard touchdown. That was the running part of the spread that Idaho State was killing UNLV with. Then you have the passing. How many Idaho State wide receivers caught a pass and there was no UNLV player within 15 yards of them? It was unbelievably bad defense. I'm not going to lie. It's been a long time since I saw a team play that bad. UNLV is extremely lucky they got out of that game with a win. Extremely lucky. And right on cue, Clown Mullen shows up in the post-game press conference, cracking jokes and making references to Gladiator. Look here, bud. You almost got your ass beat. In fact, you did get your ass beat in every way except the scoreboard by Idaho State. This was a 5-win FCS team a year ago. And they took UNLV to the absolute limit yesterday. Beat them bad in the first half. Beat them bad. The game is 2 halves long, I know, and UNLV got the win. And at the end of the day, I guess that's all that matters. But holy cow, y'all got to play UCLA in a couple of, hell, you play Sam Houston coming up, they might beat you. Then you play UCLA, you got to play Boise State again. UNLV looked bad. Alex Orji is not a quarterback. Somebody that cares about Alex Orji, and I don't, needs to sit him down and say, listen, if you want any future at all, even a possibility of a future in football, you have got to stop playing quarterback immediately. Yesterday. Don't ever take another snap at quarterback again. Don't ever go to another practice as a quarterback of a team. Go to your coach's office today and demand a position change. Tight end, running back, inside linebacker, something. He's extremely athletic. He's built like a tank. His legs look like tree trunks. He's a specimen to behold physically. He's one of the worst quarterbacks on the planet. He's terrible. Oh, but he was 3 for 3, Lou. Yeah, passes behind the line of scrimmage, swing passes and bubble screens, a fumble on the end zone. Even the touchdown he scored on the scramble, he did this little crow hop into the end zone for no reason, which is what caused the fumble the first time, the dive. And so he could have fumbled again. The guy is not a quarterback. I thought the other quarterback, Calandria, played way better. And he can run too. So there's not even a benefit to playing Orji over Calandria. It'd be one thing if Calandria couldn't run and he was just your prototypical sort of statue pocket passer. That's one thing. You go, well, we got to play them both because Calandria throws the ball, but he can't run around. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. I wrote the numbers down, didn't I? Calandria was 15 of 21 for 195 yards with a touchdown and no interceptions. And he can run around. Alex Orji, 3 of 3 for 37 yards. Come on, man. And the offense just looked way more in rhythm when Calandria was in the game. Now, first half, and if you didn't watch the game, I know a lot of people had a hard time finding the game. It wasn't on a channel. It was streaming on Amazon Prime and on the Mountain West Network website. But they did the rotating quarterbacks thing. Now, I knew they were going to do that, and you would have thought that Idaho State would be a good game to do that in, a game that you're going to win easily. Let's not forget here, when the line was put out for this game, UNLV was a 24-point favorite. That's a lie. People that bet on football put so much money on UNLV that the line went all the way up to 31 at kickoff. UNLV was favored in this game by 31 points. So you're expecting a blowout. You say, well, we'll play both quarterbacks. There seemed to be no plan, rhyme, or reason as to which quarterback went in for which series. In other words, it wasn't, Orgy won, Calandria won. Orgy won, Calandria won. Orgy played the first series, took him right down the field, fumbled on the goal line. Calandria comes in, 3 and out. Next series, Calandria again. Next series, Orgy. Next series, Orgy. Next series, Calandria. Next series, Calandria. Like, it seemed like they were literally just figuring it out in real time. No real plan. And while the offense wasn't great in the first half, especially with either quarterback, it did look like it ran smoother with Calandria. Alex Orgy is not a quarterback. You know, Dan Mullen, how long is he going to live off of Dak Prescott and Tim Tebow? I mean, the guys had, 10, 12 quarterbacks. 2 of them were good. I mean, you're not going to turn Alex Orgy into a quarterback, Dan. It's not going to. The guy is not a quarterback. He's extremely athletic. He's big, strong, and fast. That doesn't make him a quarterback, dude. He's not. I mean, you got to. He needs to change positions. Listen to some of these numbers. This is fucking alarming. Dan Mullen's. I literally wrote down Dan Mullen equals yard turd on here. It's true. He does. UNLV did have 307 rushing yards, so a bright spot there. Alex Orgy, 3 of 3 through the air for 37 yards, but again, nothing downfield. Calandria, 15 of 21, 195 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. Now, the running back for UNLV, Thomas, 147 yards on 10 carries, so the guy averaged 14 yards a carry. He had a couple of real big runs that inflate those numbers, but 3 touchdowns for him. He's the best player. Got to find a way to get him the ball. He's clearly the best player there. UNL defense, atrocious. They gave up 560 yards to Idaho State. Again, an FCS team that went 5-7 last year. Not good at all. 560 total yards, 395 passing you gave up. And again, the quarterback made some good throws. Yeah. And the receivers made some good catches. There was nobody within 10 yards of those receivers when they were catching the ball. This defense was bad. They couldn't tackle. They were out of position. Half the time, they weren't even lined up when Idaho State would snap the ball. That's what I'm talking about. It looked like they had no idea Idaho State was a spread team that went hurry up. It looked like they were completely caught off guard. Their defensive coordinator, UNLV, is a fucking joke. He used to be in the NFL. He was fired by the Raiders. That's how bad he was. He's fired by the Raiders. Guy didn't even have to sell his house. Dan Mullen hired him. The guy's terrible. UNLV's defense is, I can't even describe how bad it is. I can't even describe it. They won. We're supposed to be talking about the losers. I'm not going to sit here and shit on a literal potato. Idaho State. I did that on Friday. 9-8 video. UNLV looked real bad. There's also a misconception out there with Florida fans that I'll go ahead and clear up that my entire UNLV thing is because Dan Mullen is their coach and I'm using it to troll Florida. That's actually incorrect. I jumped on the fake UNLV bandwagon about halfway through last season. They were having a good year. It became clear that they were going to make the Mountain West Championship game and play Boise State. And it became clear that if they won that game, they were going to go to the playoffs. I love Las Vegas. I go to Las Vegas 4 or 5 times a year. UNLV, LUNLV. It became, I didn't even come up with it. Somebody in the chat section one day started calling UNLV LUNLV because I go to Vegas all the time and UNLV was having a good season last year. So I went out last year around Thanksgiving and bought the only UNLV hat in all of Augusta, Georgia. Went to the mall. One hat store had one, and it was this one. This was way before they hired Dan Mullen. They actually had, what's his name as head coach? He's at Purdue now. He had a couple of really good years at UNLV, so Purdue hired him in December, and that meant UNLV had a job opening, needed a head coach. They hired Dan Mullen after the season ended. I had already, the whole LUNLV thing had started in like October. So when they hired Dan Mullen, now, I did use the Dan Mullen hire at UNLV to troll Florida. I told you, that's the only reason I had UNLV ranked 15. It's because I wanted them to make the playoffs while Florida goes to the Gasparilla Bowl again, because it would be hilarious for the Florida fans to have to watch Dan Mullen in the playoffs, and it would be. But that's not how it started. That was just an added bonus because UNLV went out and made the idiotic decision to hire clown Mullen. And in 8 months, he has turned UNLV from a top 25 team potentially the best group of 5 team with a chance to make the playoffs this year into one of the worst football teams on the planet. Dan Mullen has achieved that in 8 months. Completely flipped the roster over, brought in almost 40 Power 4 transfer players. So there's talent on the team. If you're a Georgia fan or an Alabama fan, and you were watching any of the UNLV game yesterday, you might have seen a familiar name in the secondary, Jake Pope. Jake Pope was so good coming out of high school that Nick Saban gave him a scholarship to play defense at Bama. When Nick Saban left and Jake Pope transferred, Kirby Smart thought he was so good that he gave Jake Pope a scholarship to come to Georgia. You're talking about a kid who Nick Saban wanted and then a kid that Kirby Smart wanted. It must have some potential. He plays for UNLV. Alex Orji, the quarterback from Michigan last year. Calandria was the quarterback at Virginia last year. The offensive and defensive lines. This is a roster filled with players who were recruited and signed by Power 4 schools, couldn't get on the field in a lot of cases. That's true. Weren't not good enough to play, but good enough to get scholarships. And now they're at UNLV. And that's what it looked like yesterday. It looked like 11 different people running around doing their own thing. It did not look like a team. It did not look cohesive. There was no chemistry on the defensive side of the ball. The linebackers had no idea what the secondary was doing. The secondary had no idea what the defensive line was doing. The coaches had no idea what anybody was doing. It looked like a mercenary school. Whatever Dan Mullen did or is doing there did not work yesterday. That was really bad. And for him to come out in the post-game press conference and immediately get to the cracking jokes routine and talking about Gladiator and, wow, that was entertaining, wasn't it? No, Dan, it was a shit show, my guy. It was fucking embarrassing. It was embarrassing. It's no different than when you were at Florida and you lost to a group of 5 team. You nearly lost to a school, a classification below you. You're a G5 team now, Dan. You should not be in bar fights in the fourth quarter with FCS teams. No, it was not entertaining. It was a fucking disaster, dude. But what is wrong with you? Clown level 1 million. But UNLV is 1-0. They got more wins this year than Florida does. Who's going to have more wins this year, Dan Mullen or Billy Napier? It's going to be close. It's going to be close. That team I saw yesterday, UNLV, now they do have a light schedule, but that team I saw yesterday is maybe a 7 or an 8 win team, maybe. It's about what Florida is. Who's going to have more wins this year? Billy Napier or Dan Mullen? It's interesting. We'll figure it out. But Potato State, your season is over. So there you go. Did we wrap them all up? Let's see. We did UNLV, Idaho State. We did Hawaii and Stanford. We did K-State and Iowa State. We did Fresno State and Kansas. So we got all that wrapped up. Potato salad. Yeah. Idaho State made UNLV look like potato salad. What they did. It's an absolute shame. All right. Got some more stuff to talk. Oh, so my picks. How did I do? So y'all can troll me. I picked Kansas State to win. These are just my picks. Then I'll talk about my bets. I picked Kansas State to win. They lost. You can troll me. I picked Kansas to win. They won. I picked Hawaii to win. They won. What game am I leaving out? I picked Hawaii. I picked UNLV to win, and they won. So as far as just picking those winners, I was 4-0. Now, of course, I also gamble on games on occasion. And when you gamble, you're not just picking the winners, you're picking the point spreads in a lot of cases. So here's where you control me. I took Kansas State and I actually bet it. I bet Kansas State on the money line to win, which means all they had to do was win the game. They didn't. I lost that bet. That's 0-1. I also had a bet in the Kansas State-Iowa State game under 24.5 points in the first half. That bet hit 1-1. The UNLV game. I bet the UNLV game on Tuesday at 25. I had UNLV minus 25. That obviously did not hit. That put me at 1-2. I had Fresno State plus 13. That did not hit. They got blown out 31-7. That puts me at 1-3. I had Hawaii minus 2.5. Walk-off field goal at the end of the game, literally as time expired, gave Hawaii a 3-point win. So I won that bet. That put me at 3-2 for the day. I also had a bet on the under in Hawaii and Stanford, under 49 or 50, and the under hit. So I ended up going 3-3 on my bets, 4-0 picking the winners, and I lost $59 gambling. I don't bet a lot of money on the games. And you're saying, how'd you lose money if you went 3-3? I don't bet the same amounts on every game. And you have about 10% juice when you're laying odds. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So you trolled me. I lost $59 betting on the games yesterday. You can troll me on that. All right. Heisman. Well, there's no point in doing the Heisman. My preseason Heisman finalists, I named 3. It was Jeremiah Smith, Jeremiah Love, and Cade Klubnik. Those were my 3 Heisman finalist preseason predictions. After week 0, who's my Heisman frontrunner? Jalen Daniels. Again, only talking about teams that have played. So I'm not saying, I'm not telling you Jalen Daniels is better than Cade Klubnik or any of those players, or that Jalen Daniels is winning the Heisman over the what. I'm just saying those other players haven't played yet. So based only on week 0 and week 0 only, the best player I saw yesterday was Jalen Daniels. I'd have him on the top of my Heisman list. We're back. None of the We're Back teams played. Normally, I update the We're Back rankings every Sunday during this video. The We're Back rankings as they stand right now. Number 1, Miami. Number 2, Texas A&M. Number 3, Florida. Number 4, Auburn. Number 5, Tennessee. Number 6, Nebraska. That's the We're Back rankings that I did a couple of weeks ago when I uploaded a video. They haven't changed yet because none of those teams have played. But I will tell you, now that Auburn has claimed all those fake national titles, that tells me that they're expecting a terrible season. And so they went back in time and claimed a bunch of fake national titles and announced it right before the season starts to make their fans feel better for the fact that they're about to have another 5 or 6 win season. So even though none of these teams played, I'm actually moving Auburn to the very back of the We're Back rankings. So it would be Miami 1, Texas A&M 2, Florida 3, Tennessee 4, Nebraska 5, Auburn dead last. Number 1 means the team that's actually the closest to being back, in my opinion. So that would be, I think Miami's closer to being back than any of those. What does being back mean? You have to win your conference or win a playoff game. I'm not even talking national titles. Obviously, everybody on that list wants to win a national title, but to get off of my We're Back list, you have to win your conference or win a playoff game. None of these teams have done that in at least 10 years. That's why they're on the We're Back list. Again, the updated We're Back. Miami 1, 2, Texas A&M, 3, Florida, 4, Tennessee, 5, Nebraska, 6, Auburn. They must be going to be terrible. There's no other reason to go back and claim natties. So there you go. Best team I saw yesterday, Kansas. They look legitimate. Kansas looks like a team that needs to be added to everybody's list of teams that you think can win the Big 12. If you thought there was 4 teams, then you got to add, now you think there's 5. If you thought there was 6, now you think there's 7. From what I saw yesterday, you have to put Kansas in that mix of teams that at least has the potential to make the Big 12 title game. They looked legitimate. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. They've got a dynamic quarterback. They can do both. They played good defense, and they dominated their opponent. They were the best team I saw yesterday. The worst team I saw yesterday, probably UNLV. They were terrible. Dan Mullen ought to be ashamed. He really ought to be ashamed. Don't know what they're doing list from yesterday. Who yesterday didn't know what they were doing? Dan Mullen. No clue what he's doing. 0. What a fucking clown you are. You know who else didn't know what they were doing? Avery Johnson's family. Have y'all seen the video? I'll play it right now. That is Avery Johnson's dad and Avery Johnson's brother in a street fight outside of the stadium in Ireland after the Kansas State-Iowa State game. Imagine you're Avery Johnson. You got to play in the pouring down rain, terrible conditions, a conference game against a conference rival. You lose a 3-point game, a hard-fought, close game, and you walk outside the stadium and you got to watch your dad and your brother rolling around in the fucking street, literally throwing fists at each other. What in the world is going on? We need to get Kansas State into the SEC immediately. This is amazing. This is SEC behavior. Kansas State, I don't know if we need to kick somebody out and bring Kansas State in, or if we just need to add them outright, or usually you like to add 2 at a time, so we have to find somebody else. Kansas State, shout out to y'all. That's SEC behavior right there. family members fighting each other in a drunken rage outside the stadium immediately after the game in a foreign fucking country. Nothing says Ireland like two family members fighting in the street outside of a sporting event. That was amazing. That was unbelievable. Anyway, week 0 is in the books. That's also amazing. 5 straight days of games coming up for week 1. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Check the Patreon page. Those of you who are members on Patreon, I put a poll up this morning. We're going to have to figure out the streaming schedule for those 5 days. The only thing I know for sure right now, Thursday night at 9 p.m., I normally do the call-in show. Nebraska plays Cincinnati Thursday night at 9 p.m. Instead of the call-in show Thursday night at 9, I'm going to stream on YouTube the Nebraska-Cincinnati game. As far as all the games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, that's going to be up to the good people over on Patreon. Again, I put the first poll up already. Make sure you go over there and cast your vote because we got to figure this stuff out pretty quick because we don't have till Saturday to wait like we normally do. We got to get things figured out by Wednesday or Thursday. So that's that. Call-in show Tuesday night at 9 will be the only call-in show this week. All right, the appetizer is done. Week 0 in the books. Next week, week 1, the rest of these dumbasses play. The rest of these deadbeats play. Next week's Your Season Is Over video might be one of the greatest Your Season Is Over videos of all time. Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Colorado. The list just goes on and on and on and on. I'm going to have to buy, I might have to build another wall just to hold all the helmets for next Sunday's Your Season Is Over. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Welcome to the 2025 college football season. Please hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. I do appreciate you watching. I do this every Sunday. You hate it, but you love to hate it. Have a good morning.